Good evening and welcome to our Genesis study. I'm glad you decided to tune in with us or join us here in the sanctuary. We're in Genesis chapter 45 this evening. Genesis chapter 45 this evening. And I want to kind of start off by chewing on the thought that as I was meditating and studying this week, that God operates in contraries or in opposites. I don't know if anybody's ever prayed for patience, but usually you pray for patience, God sends you a whole lot of things to wait on. You pray for a strong marriage, God sends a whole lot of things that challenge your marriage. You pray for peace, and God sends strife. Because God is in the business of building us to be stronger and to be better. And I think more than anything in this dialogue that we've been seeing happening in the text, we see God building Israel. And in the way that he builds Israel and builds Joseph and builds his family, he's building them through trials. And last week, we kind of ventured through Joseph exposing himself to his brothers. And we kind of ended there where he said, don't be mad at yourself. Because you sent me into slavery, but God was sending me to preserve our family. And he got this outlook that I don't think a lot of us share. A lot of times things happen in our lives and we are looking at the ledger and we're like, what in the world? God, I've been faithful, I've been praying, I've been giving, I've been trying to be nice to my neighbor, and I've been minding my business. Why is this happening? But Joseph gets an interesting perspective, and his perspective looks like it all makes sense now. And so today, as we dive into the text, I want us to be reminded that God operates in opposites. And so anytime God is working in the spirit realm, often in the earth, it does not look like what it looks like spiritually. So we're in Genesis chapter 45. And in 45, I want to pick up reading in verse number 9. Verse 9 reads this way. It says, hurry up and go to my father and say to him, thus says your son Joseph, God has made me Lord of all Egypt. Come down to me, do not tarry. You shall dwell in the land of Goshen, and you shall be near me, you and your children and your children's children and your flocks and your herds and all that you have. There I will provide for you. You shall dwell in the land of Goshen. I want to talk about Goshen because Goshen it doesn't make sense why he would have access to Goshen. Goshen is the land, it is the most beautiful, most potent land in all of Egypt. If you wanted to plant crop, it is a farmer's pick. It is his choice of where he would want to purchase the land. If we were to look at what land cost in Alabama, some of the most fertile land is the most expensive land in the state of Alabama. This is some of the most fertile land. Now, do you remember last week I told you that the Egyptians loathed the Hebrews? That although Joseph was top dog, he couldn't eat with the Egyptians. And although he could not eat with the Egyptians, he still had some power and some prominence. So it doesn't make sense that some Egyptian folks would allow him to have the entire region of Goshen. But instead, he says, he collaborates with Pharaoh and Joseph. They come together. They said, we're going to put our family aside in Goshen. Now, here's some interesting information. Goshen is not located in the center of Egypt. It's kind of on the outskirts, but it's still valuable land. And so I want you to see this because it kind of lit me up as I was studying. If Joseph and Jacob and all of them would have stayed in Canaan, they would have been subject to falling in line with the Amorites and the Amalekites and the Canaanites and the Perizzites. They would have begun to worship their gods because they would have been so engrafted into everything that they did that they were so apt to forget the Lord our God. But in Goshen, they were completely separate from the rest of the Egyptians. Because it didn't make sense to me, because in Egypt, if the Egyptians are the pagans of pagans, and they're worshiping their pharaohs, and they're worshiping the sun god, and they're worshiping Nefertiti, and they're worshiping the water god. Why would God put them in Egypt? God had set aside some land that was separate from the Egyptians, but it was close enough that they could learn some lessons from the Egyptians. And I want us to keep in mind, because sometimes God will send us places that doesn't make sense because he wants us to learn some lessons. And so you're not buddy-buddy with the people that are on the inside, but you're close enough to learn some lessons. And sometimes that looks like I'm getting a new job. My coworkers don't like me, but I'm close enough to learn some lessons. I'm close enough to learn how they're running the organization. I'm close enough to understand how things are working. I'm close enough to all of those things, right? And so what I want us to remember is that sometimes separation doesn't look like physical separation. Sometimes separation looks like spiritual separation or mental separation or emotional separation, okay? And so let's keep moving. He says to them, you shall dwell in the land of Goshen, and you shall be near me, and your children and your children's children and your flocks and your herds and all that you have, there I will provide for you. For there are yet 5 years of famine to come, so that you and your household and all that you have do not come to poverty. Now let's think about this. He says, so that you and your household and all that you have do not come to poverty. Last chapter, the chapter opens with Jacob talking to everybody, and he says, what are y'all doing? You're looking at each other, and we don't have anything. We're starving. We're about 1 day's worth of food, and everything is going to be gone. What are you doing? They've already come to poverty. And so for this statement, for him to say that you're going to come live here so that you don't come to poverty, he's saying so that you don't make poverty a way of life. Okay, how does that apply to us today? That applies to us today because sometimes we're in situations that look bad. They look like sin. They look like poverty. They look like frustration. But what God is saying is, although you're in it today, I don't want your mentality to be there so long that it becomes part of your identity. Because sometimes we're in situations where we're in the environment, but it's not who we are. Think about your Christian walk. We're in the world, but we're not of the world. Okay? And so, but the way you don't become of the world is to have a constant reminder that my of the worldness, I've got to be separate. There are some things I can't watch. Some things I cannot listen to. Some places I cannot go. That doesn't mean that I treat people funny. That doesn't mean that I walk differently. What it means is that I'm aware that there are some things I need. I got to eat like every other human. So I'm going to go out to eat. I've got to have nourishment. I need to work out. You know, I need to be among the people in the gym. But I don't need to be among the people in the club. Okay? I don't. I don't need to know the guy at the liquor store. You know, I don't. And so although I'm in this world and I have access to all the things in this world, there are some things that I need to stay separate from. And so he's speaking and he says, although you're impoverished right now, I don't want your way to become poverty. I don't want your everyday to become poverty. And sometimes I think we've got to make a demarcation that although it may not look good, feel good, and I might have all the facts to back it up, the truth is that I'm saved, that I'm a child of God. And there are certain things that I have to declare even before I can see them. Okay? Let's keep trekking. Keep trekking. Genesis 45, let's start reading in verse 11. He says, there I will provide for you. The King James Version says, there I will nourish you. I'm reading in the English Standard Version, but the King James Version says, there I will provide for you, or I will nourish you. I know I'll kind of beat this idea I beat this over the head, but sometimes your provision is tied to a place. Sometimes your provision is tied to a place. Everybody doesn't get to say, I don't want to be there. Sometimes God calls us to places and people, and our provision is tied to that. Okay? What do I mean? I believe that all them years I spent down at Auburn, my provision, it was tied to that. And the moment it ran out, I could feel it. The moment it ran out, I stopped. Doors that were easily opening stopped opening. The moment that I stopped getting opportunities to be a chaplain and all those other opportunities, at the moment the provision, but for 8 years, provision was tied to the place. In this season, provision is tied to me being in Birmingham, as much as I really don't want to. It's tied to being in Birmingham. Not that I don't like Birmingham. I love Birmingham. Was born, bred, and raised here. But provision is tied to the place, and my obedience is where God blesses. Now, I want you to watch this. When Abraham was in Canaan, he was blessed. Every time Abraham went down to Egypt, chaos broke out. Every time his son, Isaac, went down to Egypt or went somewhere else, chaos broke out. But when he was in Canaan, he was blessed. Jacob, even before his boys came, whenever he was in Canaan, there was blessing tied to the blessing. Now, what happens when famine breaks out in Canaan? The place for generations that God has tied provision to. That's why it's important that we pray before we take a job. It's important we pray before we join a church. It's why it's so important we pray before we enter a relationship. Because sometimes the place is tied to provision. God will speak and say, hey, go here. Y'all remember Elijah. Elijah was going where God said. God provided at a brook. And there at that brook, he was able to get nourishment. He was able to eat. He was able to drink. And the moment that God said it was time to move, the brook stopped flowing. The place that once fed him was now the place that caused him to go in through drought. And so I want you to see this. It says, I'm going to nourish you in a new place. I'm going to nourish you in a new place. And I think this idea that I want to throw out there to my young adults and even the people in the room is that sometimes God, in order to get you to be obedient, he's going to make it uncomfortable. In order to get you where he wants you to be, he's going to take away some of your comforts. And sometimes it's not comfortable. You used to riding, having 2 cars. You're used to being able to move like you want to move. You're used to being able to operate like you want to operate, and all of a sudden everything falling apart. But it's been on your spirit. You know you need to move and go on back, and you don't want to. And so he gives them this understanding that if you move here, you've been looking for nourishment. Y'all been traveling back and forth to Egypt because y'all are looking for food. If you move here, you're not going to have to continue to look for that one thing. All right, let's keep moving. Verse 12, and it says, and now your eyes see, and the eyes of my brother Benjamin see, that it is my mouth that speaks to you. You must tell my father of all my honor in Egypt and of all that you have seen. Hurry and bring my father down here. Then he fell upon his brother Benjamin's neck and wept. And Benjamin wept upon his neck, and he kissed all his brothers and wept upon them. And after that, his brothers talked with him. And the report was heard in Pharaoh's house. Joseph's brothers have come, and it pleased Pharaoh and his servants. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, say to your brothers, do this. Load your beasts and go back to the land of Canaan and take your father and your households, and you come to me, and I will give you the best of the land of Egypt, and you shall eat the fat of the land. And Joseph, Joseph, are commanded to say, do this, take wagons from the land of Egypt, and for your little ones and for your wives, and bring your father and come. Now let's sit here. Realistically, who else but God could orchestrate it that you have so much favor that the Pharaoh favors this one little family and says, not only can they come, not only can they get the best of the land, I'm going to provide cars and trailers so that you can bring all of your stuff and get comfortable over here. I'm going to give you everything that you need to thrive and survive over here. And he gives Joseph even a command that if you'll go ahead and get this stuff in order, the family can come on and they can be preserved and provided for. And I want to drive this point home is that Pharaoh is not God believing. Pharaoh is not saved. Pharaoh is not somebody who is walking after the Spirit of God. This is not a Bible believing person, but yet God moves his heart. Yet God shows so much favor on them. And I want to push us to remember that your boss doesn't have to be saved. The people you encounter do not have to be saved. You don't have to be in a situation where everybody believes like you, looks like you, or feels like you, because truthfully, if you have the favor of God, that's all you need. All right, let's keep going. Verse 18. Verse 20. Have no concern for your goods, for the best of the land of Egypt is all yours. And the sons of Israel did so, and Joseph gave them wagons according to the command of Pharaoh, and gave them provisions for the journey. And to each and all of them he gave a change of clothes, but to Benjamin he gave 300 shekels of silver and 5 changes of clothes. Now to his father he sent follows, 10 donkeys loaded with good things of Egypt, and 10 female donkeys loaded with grain, bread, and provision for his father on the journey. Then he sent his brothers away, and as they departed, he said to them, do not quarrel on the way. So basically, Pharaoh and Joseph are on the same page, and as Pharaoh and Joseph are on the same page, they have sent them away, but he makes this point. He says, don't y'all get out here and y'all fight on the way. And because I want you to remember, earlier in the chapter, he says to them, God made this for my good. Don't be mad at yourself that you sold me. Don't be mad at yourself that you got rid of me. Don't be mad because whatever was working, God did it. So don't y'all get out here and y'all fight among yourselves on the way home. This is a peaceable transaction. This is from God. Okay? We're gonna let this be. And y'all know how families do. Y'all know how it works. Y'all know somebody does something wrong, and then everybody want to go. We get away from public, because we're not gonna act up in front of people. But we get in closed doors, and now everybody's ganging up on whoever's fault they think it is. And so now we're arguing on the way, and we've forgotten that God has blessed. We've forgotten that God has provided. We've forgotten that we've survived. And so nobody's focused on God and what he's done. We're all focused on who we think messed up. And so here he says, now don't y'all quarrel. And in the subtext we can see, if anything, y'all need to be thanking God that this turned out this way. Because y'all went from being in jail and in prison to starving, and now you're getting the best of the land. So he tells them not to quarrel. And as we sit through that, and I want us to kind of think for a second, how many times has God blessed us and we were still focused on earthly problems? How many times has God brought us out of some trouble? God brought us out of some chaos, and our focus was still on, well, they ain't speak. They didn't handle that right. I don't like how they were looking at me. And as a result, we missed the blessing. Now, I want you to remember this. God blesses good stewards, doesn't he? Y'all remember, y'all know the parable of the talents. That when we're a good steward of something, God often gives us more to be a good steward over. Okay? And sometimes our stewardship looks like our acknowledgement of who gave it to us. It's an acknowledgement of who put it in our hand. Yes, it's how you take care of it, it's how you grow it, how you tend it, but sometimes it is the heart of the matter of how or who did we acknowledge for it. And sometimes our earthly problems, they get in the way. They get in the way. Any questions, any comments? Okay, let's keep going. Let's see, 25, and he says, so they went out of Egypt and came to the land of Canaan to their father Jacob, and they told him, Joseph is still alive, and he is ruler over all the land of Egypt. And his heart became numb, for he did not believe them. But when they told him all the words of Joseph, which he said to them, when he saw the wagons that Joseph had sent to carry him, and the spirit of their father of Jacob revived. So basically what happens, they arrive back home. They get to Jacob. They say, Jacob, they said, Daddy, Joseph is alive. He said, they're still messing with me. Why are they still messing with me? And the scholars believe that he passes out. They believe he passes out, and when it says his soul became numb, they believe he passes out for a moment, possibly died for a second, suffered a heart attack, because his heart could not take that his children would be playing with him in this manner. Now remember, Joseph was his favorite. Joseph was the child he loved. He was the child he cherished. This is the firstborn of the wife that I love. And I've been mourning this boy's death for the last 20 years. Why would y'all play with me like that? And so they said, no, look. He said all of this. And he don't really care about seeing us. He wants to see you. And so we got to bring you back to see him, and he wants us to come live, and we got this whole land, and life is going to be better. And when he looks up and he sees what all Joseph has sent, it says that his soul was revived. Many of the scholars think that Jacob's revelation that his son was still alive added years to his life. Just as the revelation that his son was dead took years off of his life. And I think that that is a testament to what grief will do. Because sometimes when we grieve, we sit in that place of grief for so long that we forget to embrace the life that we have. We forget to continue to live. We forget to continue to see what it is that God is still doing and breathing among us. And so what I want you to see is he loses he grows numb, and now he sees what his son has done, and he's now excited. He's now excited. But then he says, and Israel said, notice it was Israel says, it is enough. But Joseph, my son, is still alive. I will go and see him before I die. Now, I want you to notice, verse 25, they said, so they went up to Egypt, and they came to the land of Canaan to their father Jacob. In verse 28, it says, and Israel said, okay. Remember I told you we got to watch when it goes from Jacob to Israel, because Jacob shows us that Jacob is in the flesh, that Jacob is behaving in a manner that is very humanistic. But whenever we see his persona of Israel show up, that he's got a spiritual revelation. And so Israel says, he says, okay, it's enough. God is truly keeping the promise. Now, y'all remember last time I told you that Israel was in such a place that his son told him, y'all, you know that promise God gave you? It's going to die here if we don't go to Egypt. You know, he said that we were going to be a multiple nation, and we was going to have so many descendants that we would be like the stars of the sky. That's not going to happen, because we all going to die here from starvation. In this moment, he realized that God did not lie. In this moment, he realizes that God did not lie, that the promises of God were good. And you remember, you know, Jacob, Israel has always been the one who teeter-totters on the line. You know, his entire time when he's wrestling with God in the wilderness, he doesn't even say, he doesn't admit that God is sovereign. He says, well, if you do what you say you'll do, then I'll serve you. If you do what you say you do, then I'll be faithful. But I'm not going to commit my faithfulness, and I'm not even sure if you're really God. Now, regardless that his father and his father's father had walked with God, and God has been providing for them. But in this moment, Israel says, okay, maybe I've been wrong all these years. Maybe he's as good as my granddaddy said he was. Maybe he's just as faithful as my father exemplified. And so we see him sitting here, and he says, I'm going to go see my son before I die. Let's go to chapter 46. And it reads this way. He says, and so Israel took his journey with all that he had, and he came to Beersheba, offered sacrifices to God of his father Isaac. Now this is important. Remember, I said that he's sitting there and he's remembering that he's got this relationship with God. He's remembering that God makes this promise. He stops at Beersheba. Beersheba is where that tree of Mamre is. This is the place that every time Abraham goes by, God speaks. This is the place that every time Isaac goes by, God speaks. This is the place of provision. This is the place where God multiplies Abraham's household. This is the place that God's hand has been on the whole time. He's been on the outskirts. I want you to see this. Isaac has never been in the center of God's will. He's been around it. He's been tiptoeing around it the whole time. He comes to Beersheba on the way to Egypt, almost as if God designed geography that way. There was no way he could avoid Beersheba before he got to Egypt, based on where they were living. So he goes to Beersheba, and he offers a sacrifice. Now, you know, Isaac was known for his sacrifices. Abraham was known for his sacrifices. Not so much with Jacob. But Jacob gets it now. He's been mourning, he's been grieving, probably been blaming God, but he says, something's happening here. And I've got to pick up what they taught me then so that I can walk in the fullness of what he promised me now. So he stops at Beersheba. He offers sacrifices to the God of his father Isaac. He offers sacrifices to God because he's saying, you know what, maybe I've been wrong all this time. Maybe my lukewarmness hasn't paid. Maybe I'm old, I'm about to die. It's all about to implode for me, but maybe if I can offer sacrifices now, maybe if I lift my hands to the hills now, I can right all this. Now, I want you to recall, this whole time, his house has been a hot mess. His boys murdering entire cities of people. He's got his children selling his other child into slavery. They're lying on top of lies because his spiritual walk hadn't been that great. And so there's been this amount of chaos. But in this moment, he says, well, maybe let's get it right. Let's try something my daddy did. And let's just be honest. Sometimes we come out of our parents' house and we're like, I'm not going to do nothing they did. They discipline this way, I'm not going to do that. They cook this way, I'm not going to do that. But the truth of the matter is when your parents are walking after God, if you want it to get right, you're going to have to come back. And I think sometimes we fight that in a rebellion. We're like, I hated growing up there. I hated that. And the truth is that if they were doing it God's way, it's the only way. It's the only way that works. All right. Verse 2. And God spoke to Israel in visions of the night and said, Jacob, Jacob. He said, here I am. Then he said, I am God, the God of your father. Do not be afraid to go down to Egypt, for there I will make you into a great nation. I myself will go down with you to Egypt, and I will bring you up again, and Joseph's hand shall close your eyes. So watch this. He goes to Beersheba. He goes to the place where God has spoken to his family all these years. When he gets there, who starts speaking? God. Now, this is the same place when Abraham would get off and go and lie and say that his wife wasn't his wife, and they would get in a mess, and he would return here, God would get him back on track, and he would speak. Then this is the same place when he would when his father would go down to Egypt and lie. I don't know what it is with him in lying. He'd go down there, and when he would get back to this place, God would speak. All these years, he's not been there, but he comes and he lays before the altar, and God begins to speak. And I want to present to you that sometimes you're not hearing God because you're not in the right place. And sometimes it's not a physical space. Sometimes it's a spiritual space. Sometimes it's, I got to figure this out on my own. You're never going to hear from God in that place. In the place where you think that you got to do it by yourself, you'll never figure it out. Sometimes it's an emotional posture. Sometimes it's, I'm just so low that life can't get better. You'll never hear from God in that space. But sometimes God is waiting on us to get in the space, and for some of us it's physical. For some of us it's spiritual. Some of us it's emotional. Some of us it is mental. But whatever your space is, God is waiting on you to get in that space. And I want you to understand this, that wherever the space that God is waiting on you to get in, it is a space that he's been tugging you to. And so only you would know. Only you would know. It is a place that he's been tugging you to. God has been trying to tell you, you need to go down to the lake. And I know that's just me with wishful thinking. But, maybe you need to go walking at East Lake Park. Maybe you need to go down to that place you used to go up to the top of the mountain, whatever that place is. I just want to encourage you to get back in that place because God begins to speak. Verse 5. Then Jacob set out from Beersheba. The sons of Israel carried Jacob their father, their little ones, their wives in their wagons that Pharaoh had sent to carry him. They also took their livestock and their goods, which they had gained in the land of Canaan, and came into Egypt. And Jacob and all of his offspring with him, his sons and his sons' sons with him, his daughters, his sons' daughters, and all of his offspring he brought with him into Egypt. Now, I want y'all to see something. They take what they gained from the last season with them. They take what they gained from the last season with them. Sometimes we think that we're going to go to the next level and we're just going to forget everything that we learned. We're going to lose everything. But why would God have you in a spot for 20 years for you not to learn anything, not to take anything with you? Why would God have you in seasons for you not to take the lessons with you? And so they take everything that they've gained. They've gained wealth. They've gained livestock. They've gained things. And so they take those things to Egypt. And I want you to see this. In the next season, God multiplies it. So in some seasons, what I want you to see is some places you get a starting place. You get some knowledge. Sometimes that looks like going to school. Sometimes that looks like gaining friendships in a season. Sometimes that looks like looks like a starter house. You get the information, the knowledge, the experience. And with all of that in season A, you take the good stuff, you carry it with you, and you use that wisdom. Okay? You use the wisdom of what was, and you take it to the new place. Now there's a danger here. Because sometimes we want to take all the old stuff with us to the next season, and all the stuff in the old season can't go. Because I want you to notice what Pharaoh says in the last chapter. He says, tell them, don't worry about the big stuff, basically what it's saying. You take the important stuff, but the land has plenty. So you don't have to rip your crops out the ground. You don't have to do that. We got plenty of land. And so it's kind of like, in Matthew 13, like Pastor Will preached Sunday, the wheat and the tares. Some stuff stays, some stuff goes. Okay? Here we go. Verse 8. Now, and this is going to be a lot, so hang in here with me. It's a whole bunch of names. But I want you to see this because I think that it drives the point home. He says, verse 8, it says, now these are the names of the descendants of Israel who came into Egypt, Jacob and his sons, Reuben. Jacob's firstborn and the sons of Reuben, Hanok, Palu, Hezron, Carmi. The sons of Simeon, Jemuel, Jamin, Ohad, Jachin, Zohar, Shual, son of the Canaanite woman. The sons of Levite, Gershon, Kohath, Merari. The sons of Judah, Onan, Shelah, Perez, Zerah. But and Onan died in the land of Canaan. And the sons of Perez were Hezron and Hamul. And the sons of Issachar, Tola, Puvah, Yob, Shimron. The sons of Zebulun, Sered, Elon, Jalil. These were the sons of Leah, whom bore the son to Jacob in Paddan Aram together, and with his daughter Dinah. Altogether his sons and his daughters numbered 33. The sons of Gad, now hold that number 33. The sons of Gad, Ziphion, Haggai, Shunai, Ezron, Eri, Arodai, and Areli. The sons of Asher, Imnah, Ishva, Ishvi, Beriah, Sarah, her sister, and the sons of Beriah, Heber, Melchiel. And these are the sons of Zilpah, the sons of Laban, who gave to Leah his daughter. And these were the born of Jacob. 16 persons, okay? 33 and 16. The sons of Rachel, Jacob's wife, Joseph and Benjamin. And Joseph in the land of Egypt bore Manasseh and Ephraim, whom Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, the priest of On, bore to him. And the sons of Benjamin were Bela, Becher, Ashbel, Jerah, Naaman, Eha, Rosh, Mupim, Hupim, and Ard. These are the sons of Rachel, who were born to Jacob, 14 persons in all. The son of Dan, Husham. The sons of Naphtali, Jazel, Guni, Jezer, Shalim. These were the sons of Bilhah, whom Laban gave to Rachel his daughter, and they bore to Jacob 7 persons in all. All the persons belonging to Jacob who came into Egypt were his own descendants, not including Jacob's sons' wives, were 66 persons in all. Now, Abraham, one person, has Isaac. We know we don't count Ishmael. He has Isaac. Isaac has Jacob and Esau. This doesn't count Esau's folks. He has Jacob and Esau, and Jacob has 12 sons, and from them creates almost 70 people who are pilgrimaging into Egypt as a family. When they come out, when we get to Exodus, they will be over 400,000, okay? They're going into Egypt as a family, a large family, but as a family. They're going to come out of Egypt as a nation, okay? Now, they're going to come out of Egypt as a nation, and they're going to come out rightfully as an enslaved nation, and they're going to come out with some dysfunction. But I want you to see what God is doing. He's sending them to Egypt, one of the most organized civilizations of the day, so that they can be around what organization looks like, so that when they come out and he forms them as a nation, that they will have some basis for what a nation looks like. Sometimes we want to start something, but we have no experience with what it looks like. We want to start a business, but we've never worked for one. We want to start a church, and we've never seen what a functional church works, what a healthy church looks like. We want to start an organization or a political party, or whatever it is. We want to start something, but we've never had experience there. And I want you to notice God has this pattern in the Bible that whenever he's going to bring you into something, he puts you around it. Even Moses, he plucks him out of slavery as an infant and puts him in Pharaoh's house, because he's going to be leading a nation that has no idea what organization looks like. So he's going to bring him out of slavery as a baby so that he'll be raised among the people that have an idea of what organization looks like. So my point here is, don't hate the small beginnings. Don't hate. The scripture says, don't despise the days of small beginnings. Don't hate the days where it feels like you're doing the grunt work. Because if you're doing the grunt work, that means you're around somebody who's got more wisdom than you, a little more experience than you. And if you despise the days of your small beginnings, you are really saying, God, I don't need the experience for where you're taking me. And that's arrogant. All right, let's keep moving. We're almost through 46. All the persons of the house of Jacob who came into Egypt were 70. Verse 28. He then sent Judah ahead of him to Joseph to show the way before him in Goshen. And they came into the land of Goshen, and then Joseph prepared his chariot and went up to meet Israel, his father, in Goshen. Now this is diplomatic, what's happening here. He sends them into Goshen. And as he sends one son ahead of them, because you don't show up with a militia, or that's what it looks like, of 70 people into a nation, and you don't remind him, hey, you said I could be here. And so they send one son ahead to go and to make sure that we're on the right track, we're headed to the right place, and as we're headed to the right place, we're going to make sure that we're going in the right direction. So they send one ahead, they send gifts and accoutrements so that they can go and greet Joseph, and as they go and they greet him, he presented himself to him, and he fell on his neck, and he wept on his neck for a long time. So Joseph, let's tiptoe through that verse, because I think it's kind of weighty. Then Joseph prepared, this is 29, prepared his chariot, and he went up to meet Israel, his father, in Goshen. He presented himself to his daddy, and he fell on his neck and wept a good while. So Joseph is doing what he normally does. He's getting his chariot. You know, normally he gets his chariot. He's headed in the direction he's supposed to be in, but he's feeling some feelings of vulnerability. I've been missing the leadership of my father for 20 years. I've been missing the love and affection of my father. Pharaoh has been great in leading. He's been great in giving me opportunities. You know, Potiphar was good to me. But there is no relationship like that of my father. And so he's preparing. I want you to see the beginning of the verse. He's being diplomatic. He's doing what he's saying to do. But when he sees his dad in the land, all of a sudden he crumbles like a baby. And as he crumbles like a baby, I want to park there, because I think sometimes, and even as I think we're about to start talking about grief and living in the Word, and I might be a few weeks ahead, grief is not something we have to run from. Because anytime we run from grief, or anytime we run from those emotions, I think we're doing a disservice to the totality of the human that God made us to be. Okay? Because I want you to see this. Joseph is top dog. He's strong. He's in position. He has got power. He's got influence. He is expected to be strong at all times. But I want you to see, it shows us not just where he bleeds, but where he weeps. And I think this idea that at the top, And especially in black culture, either we are falling in the casket and weeping, or we're not doing anything at all. It is okay to have some emotions. And so he goes up, he meets his father, and he presents himself to him, and he falls on his neck, and he weeps a good while. And after he has wept, Israel says to Joseph, "Now let me die, since I have seen your face and know that you are still alive." So I want you to see this. There's this thing where Joseph is really desiring to reunite with his father, and of course his father wants to reunite with him. But all he wants to see, I'm old, I've lived a long time, I've seen my child is well, now I can rest. And that's really packed, and I'm not going to go there tonight because I think that's going to take us on a tangent we don't need to be on. But I want to say this much, that our dedication to being a whole human needs to be just as important as us trying to make sure that we survive. And what I'm about to say, maybe I'm going to try to make it tasteful as possible. I think sometimes we focus so heavily on providing physically that we forget to provide space emotionally. And as we fail to provide space emotionally, we wonder why we can't have a conversation that's civil with our family. We can't figure out why this one won't talk, why they don't come around. The same way we provide space. Don't you see what happened? Joseph has provided space. He's also provided space for the emotions. And I'm going to just leave it there because that's a tangent I don't particularly want to go down to this evening. All right, let's finish up. He says in 30, he says, Israel said to Joseph, "Now let me die, since I have seen your face and know that you're still alive." Joseph said to his brothers and his fathers in the household, "I will go up and tell Pharaoh, and I will say to him, my brothers and my father's household, who were in the land of Canaan, have come to me. And the men are shepherds, for they have been keepers of the livestock. They have been brought their flocks and their herds and all that they have. When Pharaoh calls you and says, 'What is your occupation?' you shall say, 'Your servants have been keepers of livestock from our youth, even unto now, both we and our fathers, in order that you may dwell in the land of Goshen. For every shepherd is an abomination to the Egyptians.'" And I'm going to close there. Their career, God has made them shepherds, and we see that throughout Israel, that they become shepherds. It is very telling of the way that God shepherds us. But what I want you to see this is that they could have stayed in Canaan, and I made this statement earlier. They could have stayed in Canaan. God could have blessed the land in Canaan. But God was more concerned with keeping them a pure people and keeping them beholden to him, that he puts them in Egypt in a racist society against them and segregates them off. And they grow there. And I think what I want you to see is that every time God does something, it's not always lilies and flowers. And it's for their good. He wants them to grow in Goshen so that they can grow as a family, and so that they can be separate, and so that as they're separate, there's no intermingling, so that when they become a nation, that they are strong and they believe in the Lord their God, and they're not worshiping all these other gods and these pagan gods. The short amount of time they're with Canaan, you see Jacob over here with Laban, and Laban's gods, and Rachel, the wife he loves, is bringing gods into the house, and there's a mixed marriage going on. We see all of these things. We see Esau going off and marrying these pagan women, and now the bloodline is going to be mixed up, and so the belief, the faith, the connection to God is already getting weakened. So God takes them, he puts them in the midst of a place that doesn't want to even talk to them, let alone intermarry them, so that they can grow as a family and a nation in a place together. And I know that's a rough one. That's a rough one, because we like the Exodus part. We're coming out. We're good. We're even. We're equal. And what I want you to see is that sometimes when God blesses, it looks like a curse. Sometimes when God speaks, it looks like a curse, And it's not until it's retrospective and you're looking at the chronicle of your life or the chronicle of your family, you're like, well, maybe God did mean that for good. Because going into this situation, the Egyptians thought they were the scum of the earth. I wouldn't dare go in the marketplace with them. I'm not going to even sit at the table with them. They're not worthy of breath. Evil. Evil. But God used that to make a nation beholden to him. And I want you to also see this. He makes a nation beholden unto him so that there would be a bloodline so that Christ would be able to come down 42 generations. Now, what would have happened if some demon worshipers would have intermingled with some of Jesus's bloodline? There would have been no blameless Christ, no clean Savior, no blameless God that would walk among us and understand our issues and sin not. There wouldn't be one that would exist that way. But instead, he puts them there in Goshen, separates them. Y'all pray with me. God, we thank you for this day. We thank you for your grace. We thank you for your mercy, for your power, your patience, your love, your joy, and your peace. God, we thank you that even though when we don't understand what you're doing, you do. And that you are the driver, you are the pilot, you understand where we're supposed to be. You've given us understanding, you've given us clarity, you've given us dexterity of mind. God, we thank you that when we come, we're blessed, when we go, we're blessed. And even when we don't understand that it is you blessing, that your hand is in it. And so, God, as we need strength, God, strengthen us and give us the strength to be strengthened. God, when we need patience, God, give us the power to wait long enough, God. And God, when we need to understand diplomacy, all these things, and strife comes our way, God, give us the know-how to be able to move through those situations. We believe you're God. We believe you're able. We believe you're wise. And we believe that you have the best for us. And so we thank you. We praise you. In Jesus' name, amen. Y'all be blessed. We'll catch you next week. And thank y'all for coming out.